Good evening, everyone. We have gathered here for the book discussion of Hindutva, Origin, Evolution, and Future by Aravindan Neelakandan. I am Ayushi Jain from BluOne Inc., and I welcome you all for this session. We have with us Harsh Madhusudan. Harsh Madhusudan is an Indian-based public markets investor. He has written extensively on economics. Finance, and politics for Mint, Swarajya, the Wall Street Journal, the Indian Express, and other publications. Harshji, a graduate from Dartmouth College with an AB degree in economics, is a renowned author of A New Idea of India. He also holds an MBA from NCR. We also have the author with us, Aravindan Neelakandan ji. Aravindan Neelakandan is currently a contributing editor for Swarajya. He has worked for over a decade with the Natural Resource Development Project of Vivekanand Kendra. He has authored books on sustainable agriculture technologies and traditional knowledge system in Tamil. He has co-authored Breaking India. Thank you, the author Aravindan ji and Harshji for being here. We would have a panel discussion with both the people present on the panel, and then followed by a Q&A where the audience can directly ask questions from the author and the guest. I would pass the mic on to Aravindan ji and Harshji to please begin the sessions.
Okay, sure. And first of all, thank you so much for having us here. Thank you, Aravindan. I am finally getting to meet you in person, and hopefully next time will not be so far apart our meetings. Before we get into the book, Hindutva, Origin, Evolution, and Future, I would like to first know about Aravindan the man, Aravindan the person, because in a way the man defines the motivations. So could you please tell us, I know you live in Kanyakumari, but very briefly, because I think you call yourself an eternal misfit in the acknowledgements. So what do you mean by that?
Basically, I am from Kanyakumari district, and if you have been to Kanyakumari district, then you will most probably know why I have written the book. Because of a lot, this book is essentially a personal testimony. Like this? Okay. Okay. And why I call myself an eternal misfit is because I don't fit into any of the systems. And because I don't fit into any of the systems, I found Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh kind of the best fitting thing for me, the most approximate way. That was the best fitting thing for me. It was because it itself was not a system actually. For all the misconceptions of RSS being extremely disciplinarian and all that, one systemless system in which I have found a lot of freedom has been RSS. So I saw also that how RSS has been portrayed in the media, in the academia. There was a lot of lacunae, a lot of things that I felt was kind of there has been a cognitive dissonance, so as to say, between what I experienced in RSS and what has been written about RSS. So why this gap exists? When I went into that, I understood that it is because there is a built-in hatred for Hindutva. Because Hindutva itself is something that cannot be defined. In a way, Hindutva itself is an eternal misfit in an, let us say, monopolistic religious world. So naturally, the wavelengths got synchronized, and so
Also, before we get into the heart of the book, you have dedicated it to Swamiji Madhurananda Maharaj, who's your guru. I think you hinted at that I am from Kanyakumari and therefore you'll understand why you've written the book. I think this is also along the same lines. So could you please tell us both about the motivation and briefly about the Guruji?
So, Madhurananda Maharaj, in Kanyakumari district, certain very interesting things happened long back. A student came to Chennai and he was studying in a college. There, by coincidence, Swami Vivekananda lectured. So this student was mesmerized by him, and he wanted to become a sannyasi. And he wanted to get the Diksha from Swami Vivekananda himself. But when he returned home, he got permission from his parents and all that. And when he came back, before that, Swamiji has obtained Samadhi. So he went to Holy Mother, Sharada Devi, got her Saranamrita, and then he came back and he started a Ramakrishna Vivekananda ashram here. His name was Ambikananda. At that time in Kanyakumari district, a war was going on. Proselytizing forces were in full swing and they were converting people like anything. More importantly, I remember this personally very much, okay? The Christian friends of mine, they would be carrying a book, not Bible, a religious studies material with the beautiful pictures in it, and they would tell, see, we celebrate Christmas because of this, and this is what Jesus did for us, but what about Diwali? Why do you celebrate Diwali? And we won't be having an answer. Most of the Hindus won't be having an answer. Why you are wearing vibhuti? We won't be having an answer, right? So at this particular juncture, we were feeling like we were in this merely because of inertia. And one intellectual actually said in Tamil Nadu that the only duty of a Hindu is to get out of Hinduism. That was the kind of situation. By default, in 2 or 3 generations, you would become a Christian because you don't know anything about Hinduism. And you are surrounded by an atmosphere in which everybody knows everything about Christianity. Okay. So in such a situation, Swami Madhurananda, who came in the lineage of Swami Ambikananda, he started what is called Hindu Dharma Vidyapit. So every Sunday, just like how Christian students would be going for Bible classes, the Hindu children would be going for these religious classes. And they would be learning the fundamentals of Hindu Dharma as well as Indian history. So a stage came when Hindus got immunized against conversion attempts. I will give you one example, okay? There was this teacher, this religious classes movement became very huge, that people will have to write examination. If you want to become a teacher for these classes, you have to write an examination. And for that, you have to pay fees. And when you are conducting these classes, nobody is going to pay you. So these boys, like graduate, postgraduate boys, SSLC, HSC boys, they would go write the examination, get the degree, which gives them no career advancements. And they would pay from their pockets. They would spend every week some 3 hours to take Dharma to children. And you can, if you go through the evening newspapers and all from our side, when this examination gets conducted, it is a big event. Okay, and they give this title called Vidya Jyoti. So these students, they came and they started taking classes, and this became a phenomenon. And one of those teachers, she was a very poor Hindu girl. She didn't have parents. Okay, the parents had died. And she had some younger siblings also. At that time, they were searching for a bridegroom in her community. And in Kanyakumari district, if you know, a lot of conversions had happened. There was a bridegroom fitting for her, but he was a Christian. So they told, okay, you become a Christian and you marry to her. Logically, financially, rationally, she should have got converted because she was getting a career, she was getting a life. She didn't. And somebody asked her in front of me, a person asked her, why you didn't get converted? That is the rational thing to do. Why you didn't? And she told, I have taught children the martyrdom of Balidan of Guru Gobind Singh's sons. After that, if I get converted, then I am like she told a very bad word, okay? I'm like for sales. So I cannot get converted because I have studied this class. I have studied in this class. So that is what he created for our district.
That is very, very beautiful. I think one thing which I really liked about the book in the very beginning, you mentioned that it is Hindutva is a process. It's a historical civilizational process. It's not an ideology. It's not an ism in that sense. But instead of starting at the beginning of the chapter of the book, I want to start at the end of the book. you talk about theodiversity and creating samanvaya, which I think, because you also mentioned fundamentals of Hindu Dharma right now. So, what is theodiversity? What are the fundamentals of Hindu Dharma? And from there, and how does it fit into your book? And I think because your book is also in a kind of unmentioned sense a tribute to Savarkar's Hindutva, how does it fit into his framework also, if you can help us?
What are the fundamentals of Hindu Dharma? I would say the very basic fundamental of Hindu Dharma is theodiversity, because it accepts the human capacity to experience the divine in multiple ways. And it does not deny the right, it recognizes the right of every human being to achieve his or her full potential of the divine in through his or her own ways. Okay, whether it's a Christian or a Muslim, whether it's an Australian aborigine, we recognize, we validate the basic spiritual essence that is there in each and every human being, right? It does not matter what particular religion that person belongs to. At the same time, the only resistance that Hindutva gives is when a particular monopolistic religion becomes an aggressive expansionist monoculture, destroying theodiversity. Okay, and this being the basis, we have to understand what Savarkar said about Hindu Dharma as we understand generally as a subset of Hindutva, because Hindutva is a process. And what is this process? It is a process, primarily it is a process of consciousness, and then it is a process of civilization, and it also has a lot of dimensions, among which is political. Unfortunately, only the political dimension is getting blown out of proportion. That is what this.
Speaking of Savarkar, and you also mentioned Australian aborigines as an example right now. And you implied that there's nothing wrong if somebody is following Christianity or Islam, except when it becomes a monoculture. That is the resistance Hindutva gives. But coming back to the Australian aborigine example, could you link it to what was the final sentence in Savarkar's Hindutva monograph in 1923, 100 years ago? And this process, can it go from territorial, if at all it is territorial, to universal? How universal is Hindutva?
So, if you go through the monograph of Savarkar, the last statement that he makes is very, very interesting. And in fact, it is a kind of a shock for any person, because he says at the height of the Hinduness, a person ceases to be Hindu. That is what he says. The height of Hinduness, the person ceases to be Hindu, and he can embrace the entire universe as his own home. So, if you go through the actual history of Hindutva, you will find that almost every Hindutva writer has emphasized this, that we need to be strong because this nation is a blessing to the entire world. And ultimately, what is the blessing? The blessing is to validate each and every spiritual tradition that exists in this planet. Whether it is an African native religion, whether it is Native American shamanism, or whether it is Siberian shamanism, or whether it is Australian aborigines. For example, there is this Uluru Rocks in Australia, and a Hindu goes there. And if he looks at that Uluru Rocks, he won't be saying that this is satanic and only the Kailash mountains are sacred. He would rather bow down before the Uluru Rocks with the same spiritual vibration that he has for Kailash. So that is the validation, the spiritual validation. When we tell that India is going to be a Vishwa Guru, we do not mean that we are going to impose our way of culture, our way of thinking on people. What we are telling is that we will validate each and every spiritual tradition in the world. And it is actually a very good thing for Christianity and Islam, because unless otherwise Christianity and Islam are going to lose their monopolistic tendencies, they will become destructive mutually. It will be mutually assured destruction for them. So if they lose that monopolistic tendency, then what remains? They are almost exactly like Hindus. That is what Hindutva is all about. Recognition of theodiversity. I have given a solid example here. When a Christian tells that I recognize the spiritual truth in all the religions, then what happens? I have a solid example here of Anthony de Mella, who was a Catholic Jesuit priest, and he used to conduct retreats and sadhana, everything. And when he said this thing exactly, what happened was after his death, his books were withdrawn by the church from the stalls. So this is actually an assault on Hindutva. The assault on Anthony D. Miller should be seen as an assault on Hindutva itself. So that is how we see the whole.
One question I'll ask you is, of course, now the way we are talking about Australian aborigines or Native American traditions, shamanism, Siberian, even pre-Christian European traditions, pre-Islamic Arab traditions, within the Indian subcontinent itself, is that not what our great ancestors did, in a way, reconciling the quote-unquote high tradition with the quote-unquote local animistic tradition? Let us say the Jagannath Puri Mandir. Could you help us understand, all of us here, how did quote-unquote Hindutva, this historical civilizational process, expand? We'll come to the future in a moment. How did it expand? It must have expanded in consciousness, deliberately and subconsciously. And maybe use examples of where it was a two-way assimilation, a two-way integration, not a one-way assimilation.
Very correct, Harsh. It is essentially, as he said, it is a two-way integration. But the point is, we do not know, when it is a two-way, we do not know where the tribal ends and where the so-called high religion starts, the so-called Brahminical religion starts, if we ought to use the term Brahminical at all. For example, from the colonial anthropologists to even M.N. Srinivas, they have all talked about Sanskritization. And they have told us this is some kind of copying things from them and all that. Now, we all are very familiar with the Sabarimala because of that Malikapuram and all that. Okay. So, if you go to Sabarimala, what happens is, when you are going for the first time, you have to do something called Pete Thulal. What do? You become a tribal person. You dress yourself like a tribal person. And then you dance a tribal dance. And after that, you are going to Sabarimala. And what you see in Sabarimala after you have climbed the 18 steps is, first what you see is Tattvamasi written in Devanagari and Malayalam script. Okay. And Tamil also, if I remember correctly. Yeah. So here you see a beautiful way in which these two things get integrated in a very organic manner. And do we have a framework, an academic framework for this? Do we have to always rely on this Sanskritization framework that has been given to us by the colonialists? I come from Tamil Nadu, and so I will give you a very strong Tamil example. There is a famous epic called Chilapadigaram. This was written around 3rd century CE, most probably. There, the hero and the heroine are moving through a forest. And in the forest, they are seeing the tribals worshipping the goddess. And the poet describes how this worship was happening. And there are a 4-line couplet is there, which says that the first 2 lines, the goddess is wearing the skin of the lion, that of the tiger and the elephant, and she is standing on this wild buffalo head. And the description is very clear that the goddess is actually a very fierce tribal goddess. The next 2 lines say, that is the goddess who is standing on the end of the scriptures and who is omnipresent throughout the world without discontinuity. And those 2 lines are very philosophical, mystical goddess. You can say the goddess of the Upanishads, in Kena Upanishad, that Umakam. That is the goddess that these 2 lines are showing. And all the 4 lines are in the same verse, and they are attributed to the hymn sung by tribals in the worship of the goddess in deep south 3rd century CE. So what does it show? It shows that continuously this Theo-osmosis has been happening. There is no concrete walls between the tribal culture and the so-called non-tribal culture. Both the cultures are bound by something like a cell membrane, a very organic thing that actually allows the elements to go here and there. So to tell this, but this is the process actually, to come to your question, this is the process through which the cultures, the tribal cultures get protected and validated. They are not absorbed. They are protected and validated. The features are always there. The tribal features are always there. You can always see that. The tribal shamanic rituals are always there. That is why even in the so-called Brahminic tradition, from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, you can see a lot of variation. From where does this variation come from? These variations come from the local tribal culture, local cultures, local rural cultures, Grama Devata, the Kula Devata, all those are absorbed into this and this is. So this model, unfortunately, our academics have not worked on it. The reason I will tell you why. Because the Protestant or the colonial anthropology and then the Marxist anthropology, they never see anything of value, spiritual value in Indian culture. These are all priestcraft. So they have to only look at what? They have to look at vested interests. So why a particular tribal goddess is also associated with Durga? Because they wanted to move up in the social ladder. They can't see that there could have been shamans who had actually felt the oneness. And they have experienced the oneness, and because of that, this assimilation has come. Or because of that, this identification has come. And that has protected the tribal culture. They could never go into this particular aspect. That is the problem with that.
Aravindan, I absolutely love the term Theo-osmosis. I think it's an excellent addition. I think, in fact, in pre-Christian Greece, Rome, Egypt, we see the deities being interchanged or being mapped to each other. Victoria, Nike, etc., etc. On that note of the goddess, this divine feminine is in a way one symbolic presence of dharmic forces, in a sense that it's not a male, one single exclusive sky god. And you've written beautifully, I mean, not just in this book, earlier in Swarajya columns, etc., about, for example, the Jewish goddess before they turned to monotheism. And what I'm leading to this question to ask you is, okay, we understand why today Islam and Christianity are, and I mean, they have always been inimical to theodiversity. But if we take a cosmic dharmic view of Rita, of balance, there must be a reason why they must have spread. And it is difficult for us to always put ourselves in others' shoes, but let us try that. Why did that Jewish goddess fade away? Why did monotheism come? Why did it become proselytizing and expansive? And then we'll come to how the things might change now. So first, let us try to understand through your Hindutva framework, why did the world become so Abrahamic?
Actually, if you go through the book, you will find one very interesting thing that I have refrained myself from using the word Abrahamic. The reason is because it may have anti-Semitic connotations. So I have refrained. But at the same time, I would use the term monopolistic religions, expansionist monopolistic religions. So there we have to make a difference between monotheist religions and monopolistic religions. Monotheist religions say that we worship one God. Monopolistic religions say that I worship one God and that one God alone is the true God, and all other gods are either false or they are satanic. They are representations of the Saturn. So from where did this particular idea come from? It is not from Judaism. Actually, if you go through the so-called Old Testament, which is the actual Bible, it is calling it Old Testament is actually a Christian arrogance. So if you go through the Hebrew Bible, you will find that this Saturn was not a big figure. It's just a small character that comes and goes. There is no idea of eternal hell in Judaism. And even the Jewish theologians would reject original sin. Okay. So it is not an expansionist religion at all. But you come to Christianity and Islam, you will find that they have become expansionist religion. Why? The reason is because the first expansionist monopolistic religion was not a so-called Abrahamic religion. It was Zoroastrianism. So they created this dualism of Ahura Mazda and Ahriman. And then they said that those who don't worship Ahura Mazda are the puppets or the agents of Ahriman. And in this book there is this inscription in which the Zoroastrian kings actually destroyed the Deva temples. And they put an inscription telling that this Deva temples have been destroyed, Ahura Mazda has been installed, etc., etc. You just remove Ahura Mazda and you put another one name, then you would find that it is almost the inscription made by Alauddin Khilji. Okay, so that is the basic aspects of these expansionist religions. This expansionist drive always has been there everywhere. These monopolistic gods always come out everywhere in all cultures, including Hindu culture. It has come out. In ancient Egypt once, exactly. The Ra worship that was brought by Akhenaten. And In India, what happened was, for example, we have two instances of this. One is the story of Hiranyakasipu, where he tells Pragalada that I am your father and you should worship only me. Right? And he denies. What does he deny actually? You look at it very carefully. What does he deny actually? He denies that God is omnipresent. If you look at these monopolistic religions, all the monopolistic religions will accept that God is omniscient, God is omnipotent. But they will deny that God is omnipresent. Because if God is present everywhere, then you will have to accept theodiversity. Right? So he denies exactly that. That is one example. And another example is Indra. When he tells when Krishna tells the cowherds to worship Govardhan hill, then Indra becomes a god of vengeance. And he tells, if you don't worship me and if you are worshipping the mountain, I am going to punish you with the rains. And Krishna stops that. In both, you will see that the omnipresence of the divine is what has been attacked. So this is a tendency that is there in the human psyche and it develops. In fact, Ram Sarup had given the term jealous gods to this, or gods of ego who emerge out of this. And what we have to do as a civilization is that is why I say that the Hindu civilization is a blessing to the entire world. We are not doing it out of supremacist tendencies. We are doing it because we want to preserve the theodiversity. This will lead to the entire destruction of the planet. So what we have to do as a civilization is to ensure that our cultural values, by that I mean this value of theodiversity, protecting theodiversity, giving resistance against monopolistic aggression, we have to take that and we have to bless every culture, every civilization with that. So for that reason, we have to build our nation state strongly. That should be the reason why we have to make ourselves strong, not because we want to become aggressive in a way the United States or China is doing.
This is such a fascinating example of the Prahlad story. I never thought of it in the way you just described. I still want to push you a bit on this. I mean, I understand the tendency is there of the jealous god or the egotistical god to sprout, so to speak. But even with Zoroastrianism, which was a long distant cousin, I mean, maybe not genetically, maybe genetically, but ideologically to the Vedas, the Iranians. So the question then still remains: why does it take root somewhere? Or the flip question is, why did it not take root in India? Um, is there some way to think about it? And I'll let you know why I'm asking you this question. But do you have any hints, maybe just broad thesis on why did it take root somewhere and not in India?
Why did it take root somewhere is because unlike India, where you have a very clear defined statement of theodiversity like Ekam Sadvipra Bhagavatanti, there is no such statement. There was pagan religion, but the pagan religions have not somehow codified themselves into a text. Here the advantage that we have is that it has been codified into a text, and then we have been told that this text is only a map, not the territory. You have to have the experience, and the text is subsumed to the experience. So we have this wonderful image of the goddess standing on the scriptures. So you have this Srudisi Manda Sinduri Krita Padabja Tulika in Lalita Sahasranam, which says that the goddess, the dust of the goddess essentially is the consciousness and the experience of the consciousness. The dust on her feet is the Simanta of the Veda Mata. Okay. So the scripture is kind of subsumed to the authentic experience, and even it has been told that when the authentic realized soul comes, then the scripture follows him like a calf follows a cow. So that kind of thing has been created and given to us. Unfortunately, the pagan cultures everywhere didn't have that. So they lost. But the way they lost is a lesson for us. The way Hypatia was killed, way Alexandria was destroyed, those are lessons for us. What will happen if you have seen that movie Akora, right? And you will find that it was a slave society. The social divisions were cleverly used by the monopolistic religion, and ultimately it destroyed a beautiful thing. That same shouldn't happen here for us.
this is so beautifully and thought-provokingly put, that because there is an explicit kind of statement of purpose at the heart of our tradition, that you shall be theodiverse. Let me put it that way, the one and only commandment in that sense. Uh, to be slightly cheeky there, that is in a way, and therefore it becomes important then to keep us reminding that what is it that we actually stand for. And in fact, even a high tradition like Smarta, the core of it is the Panchayatana Puja. You have five deities, sometimes six, five deities. You can choose any one to be the most important, but that does not make the other four false or satanic. And I thought that was very interesting. So, if that is a situation that, okay, the West, what is basically Europe, used to be understood as Christendom, how did, after being monopolized by Christianity, have we reached a situation where right now, if you look by census, in many quote unquote Western countries, Christianity is already plurality or getting close to plurality, not majority, and the trend is clearly down and falling sharply, both in quantity and quality in terms of attendance, going, etc. So, how did this mindset? See, we did not reach there. You said the Indian nation state should become strong. I agree for this reason, but we did not reach there. What happened that this thing, without being Occidentalist, the opposite of Oriental, what happened? How can we understand that better?
There is a statement by the famous scientist J.B.S. Haldane. So, almost in a joking way, he says that Charles Darwin made entire Europe Hindu, got entire Europe converted to Hinduism. That is a very important thing, because once you accept evolution, then you will have to reject creation. And once you reject creation, you have to reject a creator God. You have to reject an extra cosmic God. And once you reject an extra cosmic God, automatically you have to come to a God who is, in the Western tradition, pantheistic. And that has been happening for a long time. And one important thing about Christianity is that at the periphery of Christianity, this churning has started happening. And the church knows it very well. A person like T.L.D.G. Chardin. So what happens with him? He understands that evolution is true. He even writes in a very, very interesting note that was published posthumously. He tells that at the heart of the matter is divine feminine. So that kind of understanding is there. It is at the heart of the matter is the divine feminine. So he was able to look at it, but he cannot come out of the church. That is okay. But the point is the churning had started. And the churning reached its own crescendo during 1960s and all that. And what you have today as Christianity in the West, it has lost its theological control. But what they have done is they have allowed Christianity to become very flexible and theologically very nice and almost indistinguishable from Vedanta. All that they have done. But what they have done along with that is that they have shifted the center of gravity of fundamentalism to developing nations. So the center of gravity of fundamentalism is now shifted to countries like India. If you take an ordinary, I'm not talking about the lay Christian who is walking on the road. Take an average Catholic bishop from India, and you take an average Catholic bishop from, let us say, Switzerland, you will find that that Catholic bishop is more open to theodiversity than the Catholic bishop from India. They are more fundamentalist. Now, if they need foot soldiers for Christianity tomorrow, they can be recruited from India, they can be recruited from China, actually, and Africa, yes. And remember, Nagaland almost came close to becoming world's first Baptist church nation. Not United States, not any Western country. It was Nagaland that came close to becoming the world's first Baptist nation. So that kind of thing has been going on here. We have to understand both. That is why in the book I have mentioned both these aspects. How Western Christianity has actually got the better deal because of its interaction with the Eastern religions, Hindu Dharma, Taoism, Zen, and all that. At the same time, how they are aggressively doing proselytizing in India. Both we have to see simultaneously.
In fact, the church calls, as you said, future calling of foot soldiers. Some of them call it the blessed reflex. You know that it will actually they will come and proselytize what used to be the core of Christendom. Um, Although it does seem, without us being complacent or arrogant, and the gods forbid us from that, it does seem like a losing battle. Um, what you mentioned that there was, of course, the influence of Hinduism, Buddhism, etc. How they managed to revive also their own Greco-Roman traditions to some extent. I mean, Neoplatonism, etc. So, if to be slightly provocative here, if this kind of painful reform may not be the right word because Protestants saw themselves as reformists, uh, if this kind of churn can happen in what used to be Christendom, are you also implying, and I know the answer because I've read the book, but are you also implying for the audience this can happen in what is now the Islamic world?
Inevitably, it will have to happen, because more and more the Islamic people, when they interact with the Western sciences, particularly evolution. That is why I have my very high hopes on teaching evolution in madrasas. We should make it compulsory that evolution is taught in madrasas and modern sciences are taught in madrasas, not technologies. So if you're teaching technology, then it makes no sense. Actually, you are harming the person. But if you are going to teach them evolution, if you are going to teach them quantum mechanics, if you are going to tell them that the universe is an oscillating universe, the possibility of time being not linear, then what you are doing is you are putting your hand in the core of monopolistic theology, and you are telling that this monopolistic theology is just a fantasy. You have to forget it. Now it has become bad fantasy. You have to come out of it. So I think at one point or other, the Islamic world will come out, and it will come out of this shackles of theology. And I think already the signs are there. People are learning yoga. And look at this. When India is strongly proclaiming its Hindu identity, perhaps may not be to the liking of many people to which extent we are proclaiming that. There are people on the other side, they are telling they are not doing enough. There are people on this side telling they are doing too much. Then, whatever, when we do that, naturally a Hindu temple comes up in Arabia. Who would have thought about it? And people are learning Gita, and people are learning yoga. Point is, this is the bus has arrived. Are we going to miss the bus? And here I have given an example of Mahatma Gandhi. I think many people have kind of aversion for him, but what he told about cow protection is very important. He told that we have to reach out to the people and make them stop slaughtering the cow, not by legal banning, but by reaching out to people. What exactly he meant was reach out to the other side and make them believe in cow protection as a civilizational ethic. I think we have to start doing that. It is an outreach program, a strong outreach program that he said. It was the proto Garvapasi, actually. He suggested that. We just didn't understand that, or we are still grappling with the whole thing. We have to do that very effectively. In fact, I believe, very strongly I believe, that majority of the Indian Muslims, they have imbibed the civilizational values of India strongly. I have seen this. I have seen Muslim students, when their feet touch a book, they will instantly touch it and they will put it to the forehead, their hand to the forehead in an act of veneration. You see in India a lot of musicians coming from the Muslim population, whereas music is haram. And you see a lot of Muslim singers singing about Ma Sarata and the goddess. All this happens only in this land, and they are not slaughtered. You think about it. A person like Shirdi Sai Baba, had he existed in, let us say, Arabia, he would have been killed. Like the person who said Anil Haq was killed, Shirdi Sai Baba would have been killed. Today, Shirdi Sai Baba shrine is there, and almost every Hindu worships Shirdi Sai Baba. This kind of thing, slowly it will change, but we are running out of time. That is the actual problem that we have. But this will change them.
A very interesting point you mentioned, that how Mahatma Gandhi is now misunderstood, and perhaps some of his in a good sense, greedier motivations were not properly understood. Um, on that point, also, he was obviously the moving force behind the Pune Pact, which obviously led to all Hindus having the same electorate, not separate electorates, with, of course, reservations being the compromise. And that's a good segue to the question of, I mean, you mentioned Ambedkar as Bodhisattva here, but we also mentioned theodiversity. So how do we reconcile that with his oath in 1956, Navayana Buddhism, in which out of the 23 oaths, many of the oaths are about you shall not worship Ram or Krishna. I understand, like you, the man and his frustrations, and very understandably so. But help us reconcile these two: theodiversity, but at the same time a focus on what not to worship.
Those vows in Navayana Buddhism are really problematic. I think that we don't have to defend it, but there is a very interesting aspect in those list of vows. If I am going to tell that I am not a Hindu and I am not going to follow any of the Hindu things, I have to start with rejecting Vedas and Upanishads. In the complete list, you find there is not a mention of rejection of Vedas and Upanishads. That is the safe passage that Ambedkar created actually for us to see what he did when he proclaimed that I was born a Hindu, I won't die a Hindu. That was in 1930s, and then he didn't just like that get converted to any other religion, and then he makes a very explicit statement that getting converted, when you are getting converted for social emancipation, you should also take into account the national security. And then he says, this is very important, getting converted to Christianity or Islam would denationalize you, not Savarkar. It was Dr. Ambedkar who said this. And then when during the partition riots, Hindus were getting converted, particularly the Dalit community, he makes a statement. He tells that, see, suppose they are forcing you to eat cow meat. Eat that, come back. I will arrange here for you to do undergo Suddhi and get converted back to Hinduism. That is the statement he made. So at each and every point, he had been extremely proactively Hindu, including in the Hindu Code Bill. The definition that he gives has been taken from the definition given by Dr. Veer Savarkar. So after doing all that, he sees that the traditionalists, the traditional acharyas, with whom the power of dharma, or at least superficially, was with them. There is a conversation between Tathopan Tengadi and Dr. Ambedkar. So Tathopan Tengadi was a small boy, and he was a young boy, and he was with Dr. Ambedkar as his assistant, and he asked, and he was from RSS, as you all know. He asked Dr. Ambedkar, okay, why you want to leave Hinduism? Why you are so harsh on Hinduism? And then Dr. Ambedkar says that, see, the problem is jati, untouchability, everything. And then Tathopan Tengadi asks him, you see, you come to RSS Shagas, you are here already come, and he has visited RSS camp, and he had said that there is no untouchability in RSS, no jati, caste distinctions in RSS. So one day this RSS will be a role model for Hindu society, then why you want to convert? And he says that, but you are a small minority. Then Tathopan Tengadi, here is a very important thing. Tathopan Tengadi says, one day we will become a majority. Every part of India will have RSS Shaga. Then what is your problem? Then Dr. Ambedkar said, by minority and majority, I didn't mean that. I meant that you people don't have authority. In terms of authority, you are a minority. Suppose tomorrow, he tells this example, suppose tomorrow, your Guruji, Golwalkar, says there is no untouchability in Hindu Dharma, no place for untouchability in Hindu Dharma. And a Sankaracharya then issues a statement, in Hindu Dharma Shastras allow untouchability, people whom they will accept as authority. And then Tathopan Tengadi goes and tells this to Guruji Golwalkar. Guruji Golwalkar works on this. Now, you should understand, this is the reason why he tells, okay, let us give my people a catharsis, an experience of catharsis, let us get converted. But this works on Guruji Golwalkar. So what he does in 1969, in VHP conference, he makes a scheduled community IAS officer pass a resolution telling there is no place for untouchability in Hindu Dharma, and then makes the Dharmacharyas endorse that statement. He didn't make the Dharmacharyas tell the statement. He made a scheduled community person tell the statement, Dharmacharyas endorsed it. And that is a very important historical event. If you go through all the academic works on RSS, you won't find that mentioned. So,
I think yes, most of the foreign people often kind of skip that. I think people like Ratan Sharda ji and others have mentioned it. Uh, are Hinduism and Buddhism separate religions? What is religion and what is these isms?
if you take Hindu Dharma as a whole, then definitely Buddha Dharma is part and parcel of the great Hindu Sanatana Dharma. In fact, Dhammapada also says Isha Dharma Sanatana. Just like Smriti says Isha Dharma Sanatana, Mahabharata says Isha Dharma Sanatana, Dhammapada also says Isha Dharma Sanatana. So this division between Buddhism and Hinduism is a very artificial one. In fact, when Ambedkar made the code bill and he included Buddhist Sikhs in it, there was a question asked to him, and the answer Ambedkar said was, in terms of creed, this is actually a statement that is very paradoxical even for Dr. Ambedkar. He says, in terms of creed, there are differences, but the cultural and the legal framework is same for all these religions, which means the so-called Smriti traditions itself, which Dr. Ambedkar was was having aversion to it, even that is common for all these religions, because this has to do with the society. It doesn't have to do with the religion. So, in terms of the cultural milieu, in terms of the Shastric injunctions, everything, Buddhism is part of the greater Hindu family. I would say in the Hindu family of religions, Buddhism is a great part. And in that note, I will also talk about Dr. Ambedkar and Hinduism and Buddhism. Dr. Ambedkar was planning to get converted to Buddhism. He was oscillating. It was during the British rule. There was a Kerala sannyasin who had got converted to Christianity. He comes and asks Ambedkar, Britishers are there. So now if you get your people converted to Christianity, it will be really good for your people. Why you are not doing that? Then Dr. Ambedkar gives an answer. See, getting converted from Hinduism to Buddhism is like going from one room to another room in a single house. Getting to Christianity is like abandoning the house and going to another one house. So with that, I think answers the question.
I still want to push back a bit on that by saying, okay, you said it's part of the greater Hindu family of religions, a great part of it, Buddhism, for example. But is this on our part semantic egotism? Because then why have the word Hindu? And I know you covered that extensively in the first one or two chapters. Because in some ways, not fully, in some ways, the diaspora Khalistani problem is also about this, right? Since 1890s, there was a monograph, "We Are Not Hindu." So, what are the pros and cons? What is the trade-off of the term Hindu in 21st century India? And how do we say we are part of the same family without sounding condescending?
Right now, if you look at the whether it is Sikhs or whether it is Buddhists or Jains or even small sampradayas within Hinduism like Lingayas, from our place there is an Ayyavali, and now Narayana Guru movement, those people, they want to tell that we are not Hindus. The reason is because last 70 years we have successfully managed to make the people feel inferior with the term Hindu. That is the reason. Okay. And if we show that being a Hindu is a thing of pride, then naturally the same people will come and tell that we are also Hindus. That is one. And the second thing is, I have to tell you this very importantly with respect to the vows. For example, he rejects a lot of Hindu gods, etc. Yes. Dr. Ambedkar, yes. But then you take Satyartha Prakashan of Swami Dayananda Saraswati, he also rejects a lot of things in Hinduism. But Arya Samaj is a very much part of Hindu. The same approach we have to take for even the Navyana Buddhists, even though if they tell that we are not Hindus and all that. They can tell. It is the right of each and every human being to tell whether I am a Hindu or I am not a Hindu. But the point is, they cannot deny the umbilical cord that connects Buddhism and Sanatana Dharma. Basically, what they call Buddhism. If you remove that, for example, Buddha again and again talks about conducting Agnihotra as the greatest of the yajnas. Only thing he tells is that let there not be any sacrifice of the animals. That's all. And in a very problematic way, Buddha also talks about the pride of being a Kshatriya. and he also demeans Nagas. Again, problematic for the thesis of Ambedkar himself, because when a Naga comes and asks Buddha that he wants to join the Sangha, then Buddha says, you are a Naga, you got this split tongue, and you will be like a human being before us, you will turn a serpent outside. So because of all that, the Nagas cannot be taken into the Sangha. Then Ananda comes and asks Buddha, what if a Naga is a good person? Then Buddha says, this is again very interesting. Buddha says, in that case, let him serve Sangha this birth. The next birth, he will be born a good Arya, and then he can be joined into the Sangha. Now, you get to see these are things that come up in religion here and there and here and there, but the main spirit is universal. We know that. The main spirit is universal compassion, that is Buddha. The same way, the main spirit of Dharma is empathy, feeling the pain of others as our own, because the Brahman exists in everyone. And unfortunately, what happens is, because of this Protestant colonial anthropology, we have been trying to weaken ourselves. We have been trying to weaken ourselves, and we have been hypnotized into thinking that weakening ourselves is actually a strength. Getting a few reservations, that is our strength. What happens ultimately is that entire Hindu family of religions die. For example, in Afghanistan, Hindus and Sikhs both were facing extinction. There is no distinction. Okay, you Sikhs are a kind of monotheistic religion, let us be cousins. Nobody said that. In Pakistan, Sikhs are undergoing humiliating endangerment. And in Bangladesh, what is happening to the Buddhist tribals? And what happened to the Buddhists in Maoist China? Right? So, once you cut a person off from this umbilical cord, what happens is, for example, in the case of the Buddhist Changma tribals, it didn't even register in our mind, because they were Buddhists somewhere, something happening to them. The only organization that was talking for the rights of this Buddhist Changmas persecuted by Islamists was Vanvasi Kalyan Ashram of the RSS. So, everywhere you see, as I said in the first, it is the healing touch of Siddhartha. Right? So, when your swan is wounded, who was taking care of that swan? It was Siddhartha. And hence the swan belongs to Siddhartha, says Indra, not to the person who had injured it. Now look at all these persons who are talking about we are not Hindus. All those persons would be keeping mum when their own religion, when their own sampradayas are getting attacked by Abrahamic religions. That is what has been happening.
I have one last question, and then with the publisher's permission, I want to open up and get questions from a very engaged audience. The question is, okay, so you talk about the core fundamental of Hindu Dharma, or Dharma more broadly, being Theodiversity. So are you therefore saying, are you for secularism? Are you against secularism? Is Hindutva for or against secularism, or is it again just semantic egotism? Help us understand that concept better, and then I'll open up the floor.
What is secularism? That is the first question that we have to ask. Secularism in today's parlance is a perversion. So that secularism is nothing but it's a proto-monopolistic preparation ground. So either you are preparing it to become an Islamist country, or you are preparing it to become a Christian country, or you are preparing it for the entire country to balkanize itself. That is what today's secularism is. But if you take secularism as the principle, as it evolved, then I think Hindutva already has it. Hindutva already has that secularism. It subsumes that secularism. Secularism is definitely not Christian. And again, I want to point out one very important thing. The Renaissance and the Reform movement in the West and Protestantism are not the same. We have been made to think like that. We have been made to think that Protestantism is Reformism. Protestantism is the Wahhabi religion of the Europe. Okay, it was going back to the Bible, going back to the fundamentals, and in fact, the fundamentalist itself is actually a recognized religious sect within Protestant religions. So, what Protestant religion did was it went against Renaissance. If you look at each and every impulse that has been against modernism in the West, you can trace it back to Protestantism. Right? So, but what has happened is during the colonial historical narrative that was imposed on India, Protestantism and Reformism have been combined together and made it to look like they are the same. That is one. Second, actually, the European secularism, apart from its distancing from the state and uh, church, it also predicates itself upon works like that of Spinoza, Darwin. So Spinoza, if you take, he was basically a non-dualist. And he is a very good entry point for Advaita to flow into the Western civilization. And we often forget that. When we tell that we are against Enlightenment values, these Enlightenment values are the values that are your own actually. They are just coming from there. But if you go and trace those roots, you will find Emerson there, you will find Spinoza there, you will find Darwin there, and all these people, Thoreau. And why should then we oppose it? That is the.
We shouldn't be Occidentalist in that sense. Okay, now I want to open the floor for questions. You help us, please.
I would, yeah. Ritik, can you please pass me?
We shall still.
Arvindanji, firstly, many congratulations for writing something that exhaustive and something that helps us understand us better. And I would request everyone to maybe get a copy. I've been reading and I've been rereading several chapters. But I also realize, in being a mother, I realize that we are in a world where even though Hindutva is the foundation of being secular, being progressive, being open to any ideas and changes with time, it is the only I think we are the only ones who are under attack right now. Hinduphobia is very, very visible. It's very much aggressive, and we are in a world where we are bringing up children who will, even after understanding maybe their own dharma well, we are looked, the basic question arises is कि हम बोलते हैं for thousands of years, we were conditioned to look down upon our identities, but then that makes us weak. I mean, all these are also signs of being a weak at a weak platform. Whereas any other monotheistic religion like Islam or Christianity, they see it only growing, spreading in different countries. I mean, there are countries altogether where the demographics have changed, and the Aboriginal, religions have disappeared. So, how long and why and how do we, try and work around this narrative of being weak, especially in today's times when at times, they don't even open up to their, I mean, they're not comfortable opening up to their identity.
Actually, we are not weak. Okay, we have to understand this very clearly. For 1,000 years, we have been fighting a battle of resistance, and we have been winning significantly. And we are the only nation where an ordinary mendicant can create an empire, like Vidyaranya can create a Vijayanagar empire and fight against, right? So, number one, we have to dehypnotize ourselves from this idea that we are weak, and it is not because of the 1,000 years thing. It is mainly because of this 60 years of Nehruvian darkness. Okay, let us be very clear about it. So, what happened during that particular time? Just think about it. They created a narrative based on the discovery of India, and then it was taken over by the Marxist historians. And it was not a small thing that they did. They created this Brahminical villain, and after that, they were injecting it through you media, through novels, through movies, etc., again and again and again and again and again. Okay, and so it has become part and parcel of our psyche. Now, what we have to do, we have to dehypnotize, and to dehypnotize, what we have to do, we have to understand the actual heritage. Fortunately, even during the thick of Nehruvian darkness, a person like Anant Pai could come and he could bring Amar Chitra Katha, and then he can vitalizes, right? And I remember reading about Bhaga Jadin for the first time in Ambulimama, in Chandamama. First time I read about Bhaga Jadin in Chandamama. There were magazines like that. Today, we have actually stopped those things. And Amachitra Katha, I think it has gone into the hands of leftists, right? So we create institutions, and after that, we are handing it over to the leftists. We have to stop doing that. We have to again take this narrative forward to the people in different forms. Tell them the history. RSS did a very wonderful thing with regard to this. Every morning in RSS office, from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, there is a prayer told. It is called Egatmada Stotra, Pradasmaran Egatmada Stotra, which we list all the nation builders. Now, we have to understand very clearly the colonial narrative and how it affects us. For example, when they talk about those great Mughal dynasties and how they created bloodbath around the world, then we want to tell that, oh, we also had our Cholas, who also went around creating bloodbath, right? But that is not how Indian history has actually evolved. We are getting into the colonial trap. How Indian history has evolved, for example, I am coming from Tamil Nadu, so I can tell this with full confidence. Who was the one Chola whom my uneducated grandmother remembered? It was not Rajendra Chola, it was not Rajaraja Chola. It was a Chola called Manunidhi Chola, and his only achievement was that he killed his son, putting him under his chariot, because his son was riding a chariot which ran on a calf. Okay, so this is what actually is the civilizational narrative. We have to take this narrative, and we can be victorious because the science is also supporting us, validating us. We don't need any certificates from the science, but the point is the worldview that the science unveils is actually validating us. We are not taking full use of that. We have to make full use of it, and we have to reach out. We have to become not a proselytizing religion, but we have to become a religion that reaches out and gives its treasure to entire humanity. If we do that, then we will be doing because the military conquest age is gone. Now it is the conquest through ideas. In that we actually have an upper hand, but we are not utilizing it. That is what we have to do.
Any last question? Is it okay? Yeah, okay.
Thanks a lot for a nice presentation. I have a very small, rather very mundane question to ask you. Why is this narrative being built up, especially by the so-called Sanatan groups, that Hinduism is under attack, Hinduism is under siege, and it is fighting for its survival? And isn't this narrative a counterproductive narrative, what you are fighting against? I find this very strange that in a country of 80% Hindus, you say that day out and day in that Hindus are under attack. Why it is so, and is it not causing harm to you? Let me tell you, I don't believe much of your thinking. That's a different issue. That's my ideological position. But this is one issue which I always feel that you are putting yourself in a very weak spot.
I'm very happy that you asked this question because, as I said, I come from, Kanyakumari. Okay? It is today Kanyakumari. The name Kanyakumari is there today because of only one thing, because of the Hindu unity. Because the Christian church decided one particular point of time to change the name to Kanni Mary, Virgin Mary. Okay? And there, I have seen with my own eyes how a so-called religion of love could organize people, conduct midnight rites, and drive Hindus away. Okay, I am telling from my childhood experience. In the middle of the night, if the church bell rings, then we would be shutting down all the lights, and we would open the back door gates, and we would be waiting. If the raid comes, we have to go away. That was the way we were living in Kanyakumari district, Hindus. Okay, and then the Hindu consolidation happened through RSS. After that, the riots stopped. Till then, the Hindus can be taken for granted. Anywhere they can get beaten up, their temples can be destroyed, vandalized, and they can be talked. All kind of nonsense can be talked on Hindu gods and goddesses. All these attacks were true. I am seen it with my own eyes. And when we got our respect back is when Hindu consolidation happened through RSS. So Hindu Sangathan is a need. If you don't have it because you are in North India today, just imagine, had there been no Shivaji Maharaj, had there been no Guru Gobind Singh, had there been no Khalsa, today we would all maybe belonging to a particular religion. We would have lost the entire Hindu heritage. So this Hinduism is under danger. Hinduism is being attacked. Hinduism is in the ground zero of war. Is a fact. And how we fight that war, with how much confidence we fight that, with what strategies we fight that we have to think and we have to evolve. So it is not putting us in a desperate or in a negative, weak place. It is telling us the truth. The fact is we are getting attacked. If you live in a place where, not majority, sir, 36% Christians, you would understand what I say.
Thank you so much, Aravindan. We have one more question. Okay, this is the last question then.
Hello, sir. Jai Shri Ram. So, my question is about Ambedkar and the way you eulogize him. I like regularly read your pieces, like impressed by all, but some are, I don't know, पचाना भी मुश्किल हो जाता है. Abhi recently this happened, 22 vows of Ambedkar, and that whole thing happened around that up person, you know the thing. And even then, there was not one word of criticism from your end.
We have discussed this question.
And
You came late. We have already discussed the same question. Next question. The same point we've discussed. Navyana.
Hello, sir. You just said that this is the age of where we should conquest through our ideas, through our philosophy and our culture, unlike violence, just like other ideologies do. So, but recently there have been attacks on our same philosophy and our same scriptures. How do we counter that? Just like recently there were controversy around Ramcharitmanas. So how do we counter such narratives?
Okay, I will combine both that, okay, so that to be. One is that, yes, I have actually wrote an article. I have written an article about this particular thing in Swarajya, about this 22 votes, and just we talked about it. Why Dr. Ambedkar did not start from Vedas and Upanishads? Why he didn't say, I reject Vedas and Upanishads? If he is rejecting entire Hinduism, he should start with the reject Vedas and Upanishads. Why he didn't say that? That is number one. Okay. Number two, we have to always see Dr. Ambedkar's words in the context of how the traditional Hindu heads at that time behaved. And it is not exactly very glorious. When such a fundamental thing like walking in the streets, public streets, using the public water bodies, okay, allow the marginalized communities, the scheduled communities to use them. For that, a resolution was being passed in Bhagalpur Hindu Mahasabha, and Madan Mohan Malaviya was moved to tears, and he put his turban in the feet of the Shankaracharyas and asked them to allow that. He didn't do that. They didn't do that. Okay. So it was in this context that Dr. Ambedkar was showing his anger. We have to understand the context, and we have to take the complete works of Dr. Ambedkar completely. Okay. And if you look at that complete works, if you look at the complete works, you will find that Dr. Ambedkar says that democracy is a way of life, and there should be a spiritual basis to democracy, and that spiritual basis to democracy, the best of spiritual basis comes from the Mahavakyas of the Upanishads. And my only problem with the Hindus is that they are not living those Mahavakyas in their social life. Okay, so at that I will leave it. Okay, and now coming to your question of Ramcharitmanas, again I have written an article, you please go through that. This is the result of this Dalit narrative, an anti-Hindu pseudo-Dalit narrative that has been created and institutionalized in the last 2004 to 2014. Okay, and it has been done in such a big way that those 10 years were terrible than the reign of Aurangzeb. And it has been done. A lot of people have been feeling this victimhood and false victimhood because it is a good career and all those kind of things is happening. How do we counter it? We counter it by showing them the facts again and again and again. Remember, even a Hindu, this is something that I got from Eknath Ranade, who was the person who created the Vivekananda Rock Memorial. He said that you go to any person who is a Hindu, he may belong to any political faction, but deep inside him, the Hindutva would be there. His Hindu nature would be there. But you have to make sure that you touch that particular Hindutva. Okay? And that is a tough thing. It is the easy thing is to abuse them back. It is the easy thing is to put a case on them and put them in jail. That is the easy thing. But the hard thing is to remember that these people are also Hindus. And they are talking like this either because of genuine feeling or because they are play acting. If they are play acting, call them bluff. And if they are genuine, then give them the genuine Dharma. Show them the genuine Dharma. For example, in Tamil Nadu recently something happened. You would have known that there is a separate water tank, overhead water tank for scheduled communities. And somebody went and mixed a human excreta on that. Okay. How many dharmacharyas came out and talked about it? And when he wrote that a dharmacharya should at least sit in this, people were angry. They told, is this the work of dharmacharyas? Then what is the work of dharmacharyas? Dharmacharya's work is to tell the people to practice dharma. And practicing untouchability is not dharma. Who should tell this? Dharmacharyas should tell this. If they don't come and tell this, all the anti-Hindu forces will move into that vacant space. Okay. So that is what we have to do. We have big work with regard to this particular.
Well, I mean, I'll take the liberty of thanking on all of your behalf, Aravindan. And, I've read and learned so much from him over the years. And the only reason right now I'm not touching his feet is because he'll be embarrassed by it. But genuinely, I learn a lot from you, Aravindan. And it was a total pleasure and honor to moderate this discussion today. Thank you so much.